I'm stepping away from Pete because he's been known to make unfortunate things happen with electronics. So.
Speaking of unfortunate things, I actually think I need to go a little bit further here. And, here we go. I promised my wife I would get some additional use out of the Halloween costume. So.
Okay, so just for the record, he did not tell me he was going to do this, and I'm not sure I would have gone through with this presentation had I known.
So here, and I'm actually going to keep this on my head the whole time so you guys will take me seriously. So, so I'm going to go to Visual Studio and create a new Gadgeteer application. I feel like I should have an accent here, like, und?
Please don't.
No, I'm not going to do this. All right. The first thing that we get when we create a new Gadgeteer application is we get a visual designer. First of all, this is brand new to Gadgeteer, part of that spec. All right, I can't do that. I'm seeing people are looking at me and they're just like, dude. All right. I have hair here. All right. You get this visual designer for building these applications, where I can look at my board here and say, for my first application, I want one of these RGB LED modules on there. So I'm going to go over here to the design surface. It would not be a Microsoft demo unless I drag something onto a design surface. So here's my multicolor LED.
I thought drag and drop was my thing.
No, VB people.
Yes, sorry. Yes, VB people should be perfectly comfortable with this design. I'm sorry. I like VB. So now I've created a module on there, the multicolored LED. It's been given the default name there, LED at the bottom. Right. So if you let's see, Windows Plus. You see it's just been named LED. The class for it is this GHI Electronics.multicolor LED. And the reason why it's got that class name is because GHI created this board. All right. If you go to another vendor, they might have a different driver for their own board. All right. So again, they all adhere to the Gadgeteer specification, but everybody is free to implement their own. So that Seed Studio one, they actually had a module. I don't want to get it just because I have no idea what I would do with it. Do you guys know what a pulse oximeter is? It's that thing when you go into the emergency room or something like that, and it clamps on your finger and it takes your pulse using some optical stuff inside there.
What's the oxygen in your redness of your blood?
Thank you. Cool, thank you. You have redeemed yourself. That's awesome. So if you didn't hear what it is, it's measuring like the redness of your blood by, and that's how it's figuring out how much oxygen is in there, right? So it's saturation. So they've actually created a Gadgeteer module for that. I don't know what you would do with that, but that's great. They also have a moisture module with 2 big tongs in it that you can stick into a plant that'll tell you, or the soil actually, probably wouldn't want to jab it into a plant. But you can put that in there and it'll report back to the Gadgeteer and tell it how moist the soil is.
Wait, that's for plants? I thought it was for parents, and, you know, if your baby.
Yeah, it could be a diaper sensor. That's really great. I never thought about that.
That's a perfect dad thing, right?
That
is
is
the diaper, and you don't have to worry about it until it goes off.
I'm going to put my 5-year-old back.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. Did the Gadgeteer send an email to mom when the diaper? Okay. Jim, you realize you just got me in huge trouble in so many ways, and it's on video. So, wow. Okay. My wife's going to see that, and I'm going to be in deep trouble. Actually, I did change diapers, just for the record.
Yourself?
Many of them.
Your diapers?
2 kids. What's that?
Your diapers?
My diapers? Yes, I change my diapers all the time.
You will actually learn something here today. All right, so again, I've got these 2 modules over here, and I'm going to connect up just the first one. You see that it has all these different ports like that are numbered here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. I happen to have this module hooked up to port 11. And I see there's you can't really see it very well, but there's a little number 11 right next to that, socket that's on there. And so if I want to, I can drag and drop this over to...
We've got the daisy chain port.
Yeah, because I've got it backwards. There we go. I can drag and drop this over to 11. Now you see what Andrew was talking about, where the different sockets have specific uses. And so automatically, based on the configuration file supplied with this module, it knows which sockets I can connect this up to. And it highlights them in green. So I thought that was pretty cool, right? So I just drop that there. And now I will have an LED module in my code that is wired to socket 11. And then I just need to code against that.
Once you save it.
Yeah. Actually, I think it usually works without the save, but I have a save Twitch anyway. If I didn't want to do that, if I didn't want to manually wire that up, let's say I had a bunch of modules here, I can right-click on here and say connect all modules, and it'll use some algorithm there to connect as many up as possible using the available ports. And that's especially useful when you get into things here like this touch screen. This touch screen uses 4 different ports because it has RGB as well as the touch itself. So that tends to be a limiting factor on these where it has specific ports or sockets that you need to connect to.
And actually, it looks like your LED is connected to your R.
No, I've got it twisted. So, yeah, sorry, my board here is off 90 degrees from the way it's pictured.
I meant on the design surface. It auto-connected to 14.
Yeah, well, if I had
Yes, if you
right,
had
so
that
like
right.
on the design surface as well, it would have shuffled those around. Okay. All right, so I've got that on there, and if I want to look at the code, if I go in program.cs here, you see I've got the usual. Go ahead and add your code here. When you're writing these applications, one habit that you have to unlearn from desktop apps is a tight loop is okay, right? When you think about how this application is going to be running, you either have event-driven stuff or you have a tight loop with thread sleeps with recurring polling checks and different sensors and whatnot as part of that. You don't have to yield nicely to other processes or worry about other things running on here. You own the processing, right? So you do with it as you would. All right. Let me go in and call my LED module. So I say LED dot, and there are a bunch of nice methods that were included as part of the module driver, which is the .NET code that was provided by GHI. And I can, let's see, I want to have it blink repeatedly because that's awesome. And say I'm going to have the color be blue. Now, a little warning here. This stuff is beta. So the initial modules that came out, I don't know if you can see, but each of these LED modules has its own little microprocessor on it, which if we want, we can hook up a compiler to and write C code for. But it needs a little microprocessor to handle some of the stuff for just offloading from the main microprocessor here that's inside the Gadgeteer. So sort of like your PC has the CPU, but then you've got a graphics card, you've also got things controlling the buses and all that type of stuff, right? Same idea here, except these ones are highly tasked by just controlling one RGB LED. There's a bug in their firmware where it swaps, I believe it's red and green or red and blue, I forget which one. So the colors are all going to come out a little funky here. If I say like brown, it's going to come out some other strange color. But anyway, so I have this LED.blink repeatedly. If I build this, and I'm all plugged in, and I can either debug it or I can just deploy it. So say deploy solution. Down at the bottom here it says preparing to deploy assemblies to the device. And I might have to reset it. We'll have to see here in a second. Oh, no, there it goes. Okay, good. I was ready to reset it if I had to. There's a reset button up here. Now, one of the things you have to remember is by having a tight loop on these little microcontrollers, sometimes the deployment process has a hard time getting enough time to go out and actually deploy the bits and stop everything. Much better on the Gadgeteer than what we had on the previous versions, but it's still it works reasonably well. All right, now I'm going to reset it and have it run the program. And you should see one of these LEDs here blink repeatedly in a second.
There we go.
There we go.
So swap green and blue.
Yeah.
So he said blue, but it turns out green.
It might be green and red or something. It's really bizarre. All right. So now
the loop program loop is not you're not writing. It's in the partial class. It's somewhere hidden behind or something.
Well, no. What happened here is this has this code here blink repeatedly.
Yeah.
That goes off and fires off, I believe, another thread that does that. And as long as there's the microprocessor is always running, your code doesn't actually ever end, right? So that's going out and doing that in the background. Right.
And that's one thing to keep in mind is he's deployed a program to this. If he unplugs, so if he was debugging this and deployed it by a USB debugging, and then unplugged the USB and reset the board, it would run the program again over and over again until he deploys a new program. So particularly if you're doing things like lighting up LEDs or things like that that are consuming energy, you probably want to have some means in your program to turn those things off before you stop the program, because otherwise they'll just turn right back on when you come back.
What an excellent segue. You can also pave these as well. I mean, there are deployment tools that you can use to reset the firmware and download new stuff and everything too. So, but what you, just like what Andrew's saying, what you go and deploy to that is running all the time. Right? And then you would only need to connect to it if you want to deploy a new version of the code. So really, this could be something that again controls temperature and whatnot in your fish tank, right? And just when you need to have a new version of it, you can go out there and deploy a new version via USB. Otherwise, it just sits there and runs all the time.
Yeah. And it can run on battery power. It can run on an AC adapter. It can run from USB. The power module that comes with the Gadgeteer starter kit, the Spider starter kit, is both mini USB, and it also has an AC port, which I think you're using an AC port, right?
Yeah, I have both of them plugged up here for DC,
yeah,
right? So I've got, because...
Yes, it's a DC transformer, so sorry. AC if you've got the transformer. My dad there.
So the reason I've got that, though, is you guys have USB voltage is pretty unreliable, and running a lot of stuff here, just assuming that USB voltage is going to be 5 volts, especially on a laptop, is not usually realistic, so it's good to have a power adapter in addition to that, especially when you're doing touch screens and whatnot. Now I'm going to do another thing with this. I'm going to add another module. I'm going to add a button module, which happens to be this guy right here. And I see I have plugged him up to 5. So I'm going to link this over to 5, right? And it's just going to, I'm just going to leave it as default name button. I'm going to go in here, and now I want to have this thing turn on and turn off, like what Andrew's saying, based on whether or not I press this button. So I can comment that out for now. And I can say button dot button pressed plus equals button event handler. It should look pretty familiar, except it's button pressed instead of like a click or something like that. And inside that now, I can say, paste that in here. I have a little variable that says private rule is LED on equals false, and say
Check
if LED dot stop, or turn off, excuse me. The names make remarkably good sense here, so else, like repeat. All right, so now it's just going to toggle when I press this button.
You never toggle.
Oh yes, and you know it's actually not going to toggle. Thank you. Andrew was watching it and didn't correct me, but that's okay.
I was going to say something, but
is LED on? Actually, I think.
I was wondering why you hated the brackets there.
Sorry, I was no. I'm not going to make a comment.
You were thinking you were writing VB?
I wasn't going to say. I wasn't going to say that.
but you added semicolons, so that can't be it. Nice try there. Now you're missing
That,
a
see
semicolon.
that. There you go. Did I forget something? Okay. It's his jacket, man. It's making me really hot. All right. Then I'm just going to, I did start debugging, which I didn't set any breakpoints or anything, but I will in a second here. See at the bottom, it's deploying the assemblies to the device.